everyone. Thank you all so much for coming today to see the work of the scholars. My name is Anika Iyer, and tonight I will be talking to you about my research titled Climbing the Ladder, Steps to Success for Women in STEM Fields. Now, before I even begin, I would like to point out something that I noticed when I was creating this presentation. If you see here, these bar graphs represent path to success. When I was creating this, the only figurines available were those of males. Now, this is the crux of the problem. The fact that not even presentation technology allows us the option for women to be on this path to success is a big problem. So here's a little overview of our discussion tonight. We're going to start off with an introduction. We're going to move on to my motivation to pursue the research. We'll talk a little bit about the factors I studied, the data I collected, my evaluation of the results, my externship experience, and finally, my conclusions. In 1955, Eric Walker, who is the dean of Penn State University's engineering school and later president of the university, stated that women are not for engineering. The most evident ambition of many women is to get married and raise a family. Few companies are willing to risk $10,000 on a beautiful blonde engineer, no matter how good she may be at math. Now, it is a viewpoint like this that discourages so many women from pursuing STEM, and Walker's statement really reflects the deeply entrenched view many males and females had about women pursuing STEM in the 20th century. So for the purposes of my research, the acronym STEM refers to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Though many studies have been conducted on the apparent underrepresentation of women in STEM fields, few have comprehensively analyzed the multitude of factors that affect women's interest and pursuit of STEM. Another question that arises when talking about this subject is the fact that the ratio of women to men at entry-level positions is relatively balanced. But as one moves up the corporate ladder, the number of women narrows drastically. So what causes this to happen? Is it the women who are not motivated to attain those high-level roles? Or is it the company's fault? Who knows? Furthermore, a significant problem that plagues proponents of women in STEM is the fact that many people are unable to extrapolate the potential of a few successful women to the entire female sex. So my inspiration for conducting this as my scholars' research really stemmed from a panel that I attended with prominent women in engineering and medicine. I myself am interested in pursuing biomedical engineering in college and as a career, and I was deeply troubled to learn that the gender disparity in STEM fields, especially at high levels in these fields, is so vast. So to remedy the situation, I hope to encourage other girls like me to get interested and to pursue STEM. As you can see in this diagram here, 74% of the STEM workers are males, compared to only 26% of women. Furthermore, you can see here that of all the STEM workers, a large majority, 74% are Caucasian, while only 17% are Asian and 9% represent all other minority groups. The purpose of my study is to analyze factors that affect female interest and pursuit of STEM fields. I also hope to identify certain patterns and trends that underlie female STEM decisions. Finally, I aim to evaluate the educational and occupational journey as well as the skills women should possess in order to potentially attain success one day. The culmination of my research is creating a compilation of suggestions and recommendations to girls who are interested in pursuing STEM or other people who are interested in getting girls to go into STEM in order to help them have a better chance of attaining success one day. So since the 1960s, there's only been a 20% increase in the number of women participating in any STEM field, which is not a lot if you look at it. There was a common view, especially in the 20th century, that associated only men with STEM, and this perpetuated the stereotype that women should sit quietly and watch their husbands succeed. Furthermore, many engineering and technology schools, such as RPI, Caltech, MIT, very well-known schools, even refused to admit women into their STEM programs until the latter half of the 20th century. Universities such as Georgia Tech and MIT provided more and higher quality resources to male researchers than to female researchers. Even after World War II, many women researchers were ousted and their jobs were given to the man who came back from war. So now we move on to the factors I studied during my research. In my research, I looked at implicit gender stereotypes in the STEM classroom, familial influences, racial stereotypes and biases, the retention of STEM between high school and college and career, and also STEM workplace gender dynamics. So here you can see the effect of stereotypes on women's motivation to pursue STEM. There are three sort of subtopics that I investigated. First is perception of women as the other in the STEM classroom. Now, Julia Cumberbatch, who is the vice president of oncology PT at Pfizer, recalls a time when she was in college. This was a few decades ago, and she said that the men in the classroom looked at her and asked her, "What are you doing here? You're a woman, you're studying STEM, what is that about?" Secondly, the fact that men are more likely to be recognized as authorities in the STEM classroom. What might this mean? So when people think of a role model, the ideal student, or they need to look to somebody for help, they're more likely to look to a male student than a female student. And this is what it means when males are more likely to be recognized as authorities. Finally, the desire of women to attain perfection in order to justify their qualifications. Now this can take the form in both the STEM classroom in high school and college, as well as in the workplace. So this might take the form in the STEM classroom, where if a girl gets a poor test grade, she's more likely than a male student to have it negatively reflect on her abilities and to feel more discouraged by that poor test grade. It might take the form in the STEM workplace, where if a particular job posting lists a set of qualifications, women are more likely to feel the need to have every single qualification on that list, whereas their male counterparts would be okay with learning and not having all of those set qualifications. Now we look at the effect of familial influences on women's decision to pursue STEM. So I looked at three situations here. First, the difference between a single-parent household and a two-parent household. So after doing some research on the finance differences between a single-parent and a two-parent household, and reading a lot of literature on this issue, I came to the conclusion that girls of single-parent households don't as often receive the same amount of support to go into STEM fields as girls of two-parent working households. So why might this be? My personal theory is that based on the financial data I accumulated, single-parent households aren't necessarily always as financially stable as two-parent working households. And for this reason, because many careers in STEM require a great deal of education, such as medicine, you have to go to med school, you have to go through a residency program, and careers in STEM often require a master's degree, a PhD, etc. Because of this great deal of education, parents might encourage their child to go for a career that has more instant financial gratification than a career in STEM. Secondly, parental experience in STEM. It seems rather commonplace, but I'm really here to emphasize to you how influential this is to girls interested in pursuing STEM. Parents who have a negative experience or bad memories of STEM are less likely to offer the same support as parents who have had a career or have had positive experience in these fields. Finally, parents who have gender bias about women and men in the STEM workplace or in college, such as the fact that women are not supposed to go into those fields, women are the homemakers, etc. Gender bias like that are less likely to allow their daughters or even encourage their daughters to go into these fields. Third, the role of race in academic STEM decisions. So I looked at these factors in my research. African American female STEM class retention rate from middle school to high school and to college. The effects of racial bias in the STEM classroom. Childhood upbringing, STEM retention at historically black colleges specifically, and strategies and efforts to increase interest and participation of underrepresented groups in STEM. So what I found here for effects of racial bias in the STEM classroom, from the literature that I've read, it seemed that a lot of underrepresented women felt as though one of the primary reasons they decided not to go into STEM was because of racial bias. Furthermore, a lot of this bias took the form of unconscious bias from the teachers even, not just the students. I then looked at STEM retention at historically black colleges specifically, and what I found was that this retention rate was much greater than at any other university. perhaps because there were more mentor programs and other sort of opportunities and networks for support for these women who are interested. The data I took for my scholars research took the form of surveys and interviews. So my survey received 247 responses. It was sent out to organizations such as Society of Women Engineers, Association for Women in Science, and IEEE, just to name a few. Of the respondents, 164 graduated from college with a degree in STEM, and 178 held positions in some sort of a STEM field. 88.9% of respondents identified as Caucasian, and I don't necessarily believe that this is representative of the sort of diversity in STEM. If this survey were to be repeated in the future, I would recommend that it be distributed to organizations that had more racial diversity in their members. Now, questions for the survey may include what was your college STEM major, rate your level of satisfaction, which we will discuss later on, but it was more to obtain quantitative data. The interviews, on the other hand, were to obtain qualitative data. They were to get a sense of how the female leaders got to where they are today. So I interviewed 34 women, and I actually got the opportunity to shadow some of them. So tonight we are going to talk about two factors that I examined as a part of my survey and two factors that I examined from my interviews. As you can see in this graph, which discusses the overall college major selection, whether that be in the humanities or in STEM fields, high interest in major was the most selected option. The question put forth in the survey was, of all of these options right here, please select all that apply to you that you feel most influenced your college major, whether that be in the humanities or in STEM fields. As you can see here, 116 respondents, or 47%, cited teacher/school influence. Although this is representative of both humanities and STEM fields, it just goes to show how influential and the teachers and schools are at shaping the perception of the students. So also noteworthy here are good job prospects and familial influence. So going back to this teacher-school influence, 31% of respondents cited a poor STEM curriculum or a lack of support at their schools for being the reason that they chose not to go into STEM. In these two graphs, you can see the degree of satisfaction with the study of STEM in college, and this bottom graph here shows the degree of satisfaction of STEM in the workplace. Now, if you look at these graphs, there's something very different between the two. In this graph, 76.2% of respondents responded that they were very satisfied with their STEM study in college. But here, about 66% were very satisfied with their STEM profession. If you look here, only about 1% of respondents were dissatisfied with their studies in college, but almost 11% were somewhat dissatisfied with their STEM profession. What causes this disparity? My theory is that when you get into the STEM workplace, women often feel more microaggressions, which might take the form of backhanded compliments, passive aggressiveness, or commentary about women in STEM fields. From the interviews, I gleaned that these microaggressions are more likely to occur in the STEM workplace than they are in the STEM classroom. Next, I looked at familial influence. I learned that early exposure to a particular field encouraged the interviewees to go into that field. For example, Kate Nobile, who is the Chief Medical Officer of Pharmaceuticals for GlaxoSmithKline, revealed that she was learning pulmonary physiology at an early age, even though she didn't realize it, just because her parents, who worked in academic medicine, let her help them out in the lab when she was younger. Furthermore, Sarah Eckersley, the global R&D director at Dow, stated that her daughter, because both she, Eckersley, and her husband were engineers, her daughter had been exposed to those fields and already decided to do a PhD in the STEM fields. So this just shows that even across generations, parents and families are still very influential in girls and encouraging them to go into STEM. Next, I looked at gender bias. Maria Bezaidis, who is the principal engineer at Intel, stated that a decade or two ago, sexist microaggressions were something that they couldn't talk about very easily. Now, due to increased transparent conversations about this issue and more education to tell people that gendered commentary and sexist microaggressions are harmful, this is less of a problem. Although it's still there, it's definitely less overt now. I also learned from the interviewees that at entry-level positions, the ratio of men to women was much more balanced. But at higher-level positions, this number ebbed exponentially. Ellen Kuhlman, whom I interviewed, who was the former CEO and chairman of DuPont, stated that at more senior levels, the gender bias becomes much less overt. I recalled my interview with Sarah Eggersley, whom I mentioned earlier. She said that at her entry-level position, she had just won an award for some sort of scientific competition. A male counterpart told her, you probably won that award just because you're a woman. This is a prime example of tokenism. At senior levels, Ellen Kuhlman, among other interviewees, described gender bias as, for example, not a male counterpart not speaking directly to her, but also speaking to another male, even though she might be the expert on the issue. So as you can see, gender bias at the more senior levels takes a more of an overt form. So my externship was deeply entwined with my data analysis part of my scholars research. I shadowed at Pfizer, Dow, DuPont, and GlaxoSmithKline, and interviewed a ton of women there. These are the locations where I shadowed. You can see Pfizer over here, Dow, GlaxoSmithKline, and DuPont. This is a mind map of all the people who I talked to and interviewed with. In the yellow bubbles, you see the names of my first level of connections. These are the people whom I reached out to personally for interviews, and they agreed to help me out. You can see here's Ellen Kuhlman, Sarah Eckersley, Maria Bezaidis, and Alexa Degbeck. Now in the blue bubbles, these are my second layer of connections. These are the people whom these people in the yellow bubbles connected me with for more interviews. And finally, you see my tertiary connections. These are ladies whom the women in the blue bubbles connected me with. This is just to highlight the importance of networking and connections. So from all of these ladies, I was able to obtain 34 interviews, which is absolutely incredible, and I'm so happy that I received that opportunity. Also part of my externship, I began to create a LinkedIn. So this is a basic outline of my LinkedIn page. It will improve as I get more experience, but it's absolutely crucial for networking and to let people know what you do and your interests. And finally, my conclusions. In my conclusions, I make recommendations to improve female STEM interest in schools and in the STEM workplace. So for STEM in schools, I hope to get people to reevaluate the gender dynamic in the classroom. I also hope to introduce more and higher quality STEM classes in schools, and if schools aren't flexible enough to allow for more classes such as robotics or computer science, then I strongly encourage them to introduce extracurricular activities such as clubs, science fairs, etc. I think it's also beneficial to inform students and teachers about the harmful nature of gender bias and gendered commentary. I would also recommend to girls to join external organizations, such as the Society of Women Engineers, whose missions are to empower women to become leaders in these fields. For women in the STEM workplace, I have to stress that mentoring and networking is absolutely integral. So not only is networking a good chance for you to obtain opportunities and move up in the corporate ladder, but it's also useful if you need some help in overcoming an obstacle. I asked the interviewees about any obstacles they faced in their journey to success. A few of them cited a boss whom they had poor chemistry with, or peers who didn't support them as much as they would have liked. But they all cited a previous mentor or a network of peers who helped them overcome this challenge. So mentoring is good, and networking is good not only for opportunities, but also if you need some guidance in a time of need. I would also suggest that companies establish more programs to hire and increase interest among women of underrepresented groups. Furthermore, it's absolutely essential that women learn to advocate for themselves more and advocate for other women more. Kate Glasser, suggested that she always tries to advocate for women in junior level roles, because the junior level women are looking up to the senior level women as role models, as people that they should mimic one day when they get to that position. Finally, it is absolutely essential that women demonstrate their value and their impact in the company. In a meeting room, women should not sit at the back of the room. They should choose a prominent position at the table. They should make space for themselves. Speak within the first 10 minutes. Let people know that you are there for a reason and that your opinion matters. By following these recommendations and suggestions, hopefully we can narrow this gender gap in STEM fields and encourage more girls to be interested in and go into STEM fields. Thank you to all of these people who are listed here, and thank you all so much for coming tonight.